From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Meche breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
We're back with another edition of Cleats and Sneaks, the podcast where we're talking everything about the NFL and the NBA. Just getting so much closer to that NFL regular season, and through the last couple of weeks, we've looked at the NFC South, AFC South divisions, as well as the East divisions. Now, let's head over to the West Coast and look at their teams. And before we even get to that, I do want to talk about a couple of signings and trades, a couple of free agent moves that we've seen last week that I wasn't able to get to. And they both have to pertain to the Falcons. And it was something that I had brought up, how I had big question marks about them because of their defense. I know that they got a defensive-minded head coach, and I think that's going to help them. But based on some of the guys that they had, I was kind of worried. Well, kind of feels like I shouldn't have to worry about it now, since they were able to trade for Matthew Judon with the Patriots, only had to give up a third-round pick. So now they have another edge rusher to add to their arsenal, as well as now they have the best safety tandem in the NFL. They already had Jesse Bates, but then they were able to get a one-year deal done with Justin Simmons, the former Denver Broncos safety. So now they have both of them, plus a good cornerback in A.J. Terrell. Secondary is looking a lot better, and those were my big concerns. Linebackers they're all right, but still, big question marks were about being able to affect the passer as well as having a no-fly zone. They were able to answer that just a little bit better last week. Big concern now. I think that does change a little bit how things go in the NFC South standings. Now, moving on to the West teams and their divisions. I'll start off with the AFC side, and we'll start off with the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. At this point, I mean, you can't really doubt them. They're kind of like the new Patriots nowadays, where you want to believe and want to bet against them that they'll lose and not be able to get it done. At this point, it's kind of hard to. I know they have a couple of guys, and you worry. Travis Kelce's now a year older than he was before, and they didn't make any huge splash signings. Plus, they also got rid of a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball. But overall, their key pieces are still there. Patrick Mahomes is still in town. They still have guys like Rashee Rice, who's going to be able to take that next step forward in year number 2. They drafted Xavier Worthy out of Texas. They were able to sign Marquise Brown. Plus, they still have Isaiah Pacheco. That guy's been an absolute monster ever since he got into the NFL. And I really don't have that many qualms about their offensive line, even though there are a couple guys that I do worry about. They still have Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Jawan Taylor and company. Like, those guys, they're pretty good. And it's not like you're asking too much. Plus, the fact that you do have a little more explosion. Xavier Worthy, he should be a field stretcher for the Chiefs. You have, as well as Marquise Brown, who is kind of described as one of those as well. So even though you're working with a guy in Rashee Rice who isn't the fastest and he predominantly worked in the slot, plus you do a lot of short intermediate routes and throws underneath to Travis Kelce, being able to have those guys now, it seems like you have multiple options after moving on from guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling. You have guys that you can still work with to be like, hey, if you can stretch the field and kind of keep the defenses honest, that should make this offense even more potent, and you should be able to see the Patrick Mahomes of old where he's slinging 70, 60-yard touchdowns almost week in and week out. So this offense, I really don't have to worry about it all that much. Then you look at the defensive side of the ball. I brought it up just a minute ago how they moved on from a couple of guys. One of them is now with the Tennessee Titans, but outside of that, they still have Justin Reed, who's been pretty good for them, still pretty good as a kicker option just in case someone like Harrison Butker goes down. But Trent McDuffie, he's been one of their good other corners, as well as they have Brian Cook, who's now their free safety. But looking at their front seven, George Karlaftis, Chris Jones is the anchor of the defense. Plus they got Drew Tranquill, Nick Bolton, and Leo Chenal. They're not huge pieces, and plus they moved on from Willie Gay, who ended up signing with the Saints. But outside of that, they have guys that are on the cheap for this team that can make still a positive impact as they try to make sure that they can put together a team that is cohesive while not spending too much on the bank, because they are still paying Patrick Mahomes quite a bit. But looking at this roster, and plus what we've seen the last couple of years, I don't know how you can bet against them outside of you just basically hate watching and hate betting on them, hoping that they lose. Looking at the Los Angeles Chargers, though, this was an interesting team because They finally moved on from their head coach. I've been talking about that for years now, how they should have done it. They probably waited maybe a little bit too long, but maybe waiting wasn't the worst thing in the world because they now have one of the best coaches in football in Jim Harbaugh. He is the guy that always is able to turn programs and teams around. We've seen it multiple times, not only in college, but in the NFL. So who am I to say that he shouldn't be able to do it once again? This time it's with the Chargers team that has looked pretty lackluster the last couple of years. Plus, he's got guys that he can actually work with. Justin Herbert is one of those premier passers in the NFL that, depending on the person, they see Herbert as a top 5 guy. I'm more in he's a top 10 to 12, but he's uber talented. The big thing about this year, though, is the fact that Herbert is going to be dealing with plantar fasciitis, which I believe would be for the entirety of the season. So I think that's going to hinder him and kind of limit his play on the field. But at the same time, you look at the wide receiver room, and I'm not too sure they were going to hold him back anyway. You look at DJ Chark, Ladd McConkey, those guys are pretty nice. But the fact that you move on from Keenan Allen, you move on from Mike Williams, the 2 top guys that he's been looking towards the last couple of years, plus Austin Eckler moved on and went to the Washington Commanders. You're moving on from 3 huge key pieces, plus they have a new starting tight end from before. It's quite interesting. The big pass catchers that Justin Herbert relied on the last couple of years are no longer with the team. So he's got quite a few new guys he has to get in touch with. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, both from the Baltimore Ravens, they signed to help fill that running back room and try to fill that void that Austin Eckler has left. Plus, at this point, you look at Josh Palmer, he's, I would assume, the wide receiver 1, but I'm thinking Ladd McConkey has a good chance, especially since you look at how we're not going to be able to see as much passing down the field. Josh Palmer, he's someone that stretches the field a little bit, but you look at Quentin Johnson, you just can't rely on him to be someone that can step up for this team. You signed DJ Chark for a reason, and it was kind of later in the offseason, but still. You look at these guys, I don't expect huge, close to 5,000-yard passing from Justin Herbert, especially with how they attacked free agency. You got the 2 running backs from the Baltimore Ravens who are a run-heavy team. You look at the tight ends that they signed. Not only Hayden Hurst, but they got Will Dissly, one of them being a blocking tight end. Plus, with the 5th overall pick in the NFL draft, they took Joe Alt, a offensive lineman. Like, if we're looking at how this team is being built, and based off of what we've seen before, what we saw with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, what we saw when he was with the 49ers, this guy predicates on making sure that the run game is efficient and well-oiled machine to help set up the pass game. Justin Herbert, I think he's going to be a lot more efficient than he was before, but looking at this run game, that is going to be the full focus. I remember oftentimes I would watch Justin Herbert and he'd throw close to, if not 50 times a game, and I'm like, look, I'm more of a passing guy. I'm a little bit more on the new age nowadays, but at the same time, I understand how important the run game is to make sure that you have good balance. I think that you're probably going to lean more towards 55%, close to 60% of the time that the Chargers are going to be running the ball, especially since you look at that defense. And if you can have this new DC be able to step up and make sure that this team can do what you would believe that they can do, they should be able to get it done and make these some close, low-scoring games to where it's not a shootout and you have to rely on Justin Herbert, who's limited with the injury, plus has a bunch of guys that you maybe aren't as trusting as you did before with the veteran receivers in Allen and Mike Williams. Like, you still have guys like Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Asante, and Derwin James. Like, they have guys on the defensive side of the ball that you like and that are highlights that you need to make sure that if you're playing against the Chargers, you need to watch out for them. But I think this is going to be this team. This is going to be a team that I think ascends quite a bit. Not only with the Jim Harbaugh effect, but with the fact of how this roster is actually constructed, and I trust this coaching staff as a whole to be able to take advantage of the talent that they have. Looking at the Denver Broncos, it's interesting. Right before I started recording, Sean Payton of the Denver Broncos announced that Bo Nix will be the starting quarterback. He beat out Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. I'm not surprised by any stretch. I mean, you made sure that you were able to get him with your first-round pick. with the 12th overall pick in this last draft. Usually quarterbacks nowadays, if you're going to be a top 10, 12, 15 pick, there's a very good chance you're going to start and not even have to worry about sitting the first couple of weeks. You don't see it too often. I know we saw Patrick Mahomes back in 2017, but overall, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, those two were basically locks to go in. Now, Penix, he's going to have to sit a couple of years, but that's just a weird situation. This Denver Broncos team, I think it's interesting, especially since Javonte Williams. I expect him to take that next step forward and kind of look like what we expected him to look in his rookie season and in college, now that he's going to be 2 years removed from that ACL tear. I am curious, however, what this receiver room is going to look like. Because even though Courtland Sutton is still your wide receiver one, Tim Patrick, he's coming back after that injury. You did sign Josh Reynolds to a 2-year deal, but you have young guys in Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims who you're kind of curious, how are they going to be able to find a role and carve a role in this offense? Based off of what we've seen so far from the Broncos, I'm not expecting a lot of explosive plays. Basically, all of the passing yards and passing situations that Bo Nix was put into, even if he would scramble and buy time with his legs, and you're thinking, oh, he's about to go deep, it ends up being a 7-yard pass. And you're like, okay, this is efficient, and it's able to keep yourself ahead of the sticks. I like that. But at the same time, I'm not expecting this to be an offense that is going to be able to put up a whole bunch of points. Plus, you move on from a couple of key guys, especially Justin Simmons. I think it's going to be a solid group, but I think overall, the fact that you have to go into a loaded AFC with a rookie quarterback and wide receivers that aren't the most explosive, plus it's still not the best offensive line, I think they'll be able to show signs of growth and some sort of a sense of a team that could be built for the future. But at least in 2024, I'm not expecting the Denver Broncos to put in a whole lot of work and actually surprise some people. Then looking at the Las Vegas Raiders, they got my guy starting, Gardner Minshew, as the starting quarterback in 2024. He was able to beat out Aiden O'Connell. That's not a surprise to me. I think he's one of those guys that's pretty much a fringe starter that could start in quite a bit of situations, but I wouldn't put him ahead or put him in that middle pack where the Derek Carrs are of the world. But looking at the rest of the roster, it's kind of more of the same. It's weird that they took Michael Mayer last year, and then this last draft, they also got Brock Bowers. I think there's quite a bit of a chance that they decide to go with a lot of 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight end situations. But at the same time, I do not like this running back room. You have Zamir White as your RB1. Then you have Alexander Madison, who a lot of people anticipated him to step up that last season with the Vikings after they moved on from Dalvin Cook. Oh, he's going to be RB1. He's going to be great for fantasy. He wasn't able to do anything. Plus the other guys like Amir Abdullah, it's just some veteran guys that I'm just not expecting. I think this is going to be interesting. I think because of Gardner Minshew and this defensive-minded head coach, you'll see some low-scoring games, and I think it'll be somewhat close, but I don't think the record is going to show the fight that they have. I love what they have on defense. I love that they have some guys that they can work around. You still have Max Crosby, who's one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Plus, they were able to sign Christian Wilkins. I think that was a huge grab, especially that they got him early in the offseason. But overall, looking at the secondary and looking at the linebacker group, it's okay. I know Marcus Epps, he's been okay. I remember the interception pick 6 that Jack Jones had against the Chargers last year in that Thursday night football game. That was nice to see, but I still want to see more from Trayvon Moehrig, who I had high hopes for whenever he was coming out of college, out of TCU. But at the same time, I just don't know how much I can expect from him at this point. It's a solid front 4. I like it a lot. But looking at the rest of the defense, I need to see if guys like Robert Spillane can take that next step forward and help elevate that defensive unit. Then moving on towards the NFC side of the bracket, the San Francisco 49ers, they also made the Super Bowl. However, they were the runner-ups, and they didn't make a whole lot of change, but the big storyline about them pretty much this whole offseason has been, is Brandon Ayuk going to move on from the team and go play for, say, the Steelers or the Commanders? Well, at this point, I think the saga is just about done, and we are expecting Ayuk to stay in San Francisco, which I think is good for not only the team, but Brock Purdy individually. He's got plenty of talent to throw to, plus a really good offensive line. So I don't think that there's really going to be any sort of a lack of production, especially since you added another wide receiver to your room in Ricky Pearsall, plus being able to re-sign Juwan Jennings. I think guys like Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle also being on the team with Deebo Samuel, this offense is going to rock and roll, and you don't have to worry about one bit. But I do look at the defensive side of the ball, and it's pretty interesting because they did get a couple of guys in free agency to help bolster that defensive line, especially since they moved on from Chase Young and let him sign with the Saints. They signed guys like Leonard Floyd. They got Malik Collins. They still have Nick Bosa, and they still have Javon Hargrave. Dre Greenlaw is still a linebacker that I'm curious, how is he going to be able to recover, because he did injure himself in that Super Bowl, but they do still have Fred Warner as that Mike linebacker, plus the secondary still looks pretty good with Charvarius Ward, Jair Brown, and company. I just don't see how the 49ers can really take much of a step back, and I think they're going to be one of those 2 or 3 teams that have a really good chance of being able to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl once again. Looking at the Rams, though, I think they're one of those sleeper teams, and I really don't like to admit that, but I think the Rams are going to be really sneaky good that not a lot of people are talking about. Matthew Stafford, even though he's gotten a year older and now he's 36, at this point, based off of what I've seen with him and looking at this roster, I like what they did over the offseason. I like what they did in free agency with the draft. They were able to bolster the line just a little bit, re-signed a couple of guys. But not only are they going to get Cooper Kupp back for a healthy season, but now you're getting year number 2, and we can't wait to see what Puka Nacua looks like. Plus Kyron Williams and getting Blake Corum later in the draft. I think that's going to help the running back room, especially in case Kyron Williams goes down. You have another similar back with a similar skill set in Corum, so it's not like you have to change what you're doing offensively. Plus, with the defensive side of the ball, you got Jared Verse, who you were able to get early on in the draft, plus a couple of guys in Bobby Brown, Kobe Turner, Byron Young. Like, it's a pretty solid front 3, front 4, plus the front 7 overall is looking really good, because I don't hear a lot of talk about Ernest Jones. He's one of those sleeper linebackers that I really enjoy watching that actually makes a pretty big impact. And it's not like he was a huge first-round pick or a huge signing. Like, he was a third-rounder back in 2021, and he's been able to elevate his play and kind of take that next step forward over the last couple of years. And I can't wait to see what he's able to do. But there was one big signing that the Rams were able to get over the offseason, and I think it's going to be a big improvement for their secondary. They were able to get former LSU Tiger Tre'Davious White to help bolster that cornerback room. So you're looking at both ends, the boundary corners. It's going to be Darius Williams and White, plus you still have Cameron Curl and John Johnson as your safeties. Plus, you look at Quentin Lake, and he's also another guy that not a lot of people talk about, but I've seen him make some plays, and I like him in the slot. I think this is going to be a really good group, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go 11-6. And even though it's going to be a schedule that you maybe worry about, especially since you have to take on Detroit on their home field week 1, plus getting San Fran twice. You look at the Miami Dolphins at their home stadium, plus Buffalo, and then you also have a couple other teams. I look at plus Green Bay, but right before the bye week. But overall, I look at Minnesota, who I think is not going to be good. Same thing with the Seahawks, which we'll get into in a second. I look at the Saints, which that's a team that could be kind of middle of the pack, but I'm not too scared of them if I'm the Rams. Plus, you have against the Jets, which I know a lot of people are big on. I just don't see this being a successful season for the Jets. Plus 2 games with the Cardinals, plus a Bears team, which is pretty good. Like the defense, but I am curious to see how the offense with the rookie quarterback and the new regime comes all together. Plus, they have to go against New England. Like, I see this as an opportunity for them to very easily be 11-6, but if everything goes right, don't be surprised if they go 12-5 to end the regular season and be the top seed in the wild card, since I fully anticipate the San Francisco 49ers to win the division. Then looking at the Seahawks, brought up just a second ago, I'm not too high on them. I know that Geno Smith, he was able to kind of have that resurrecting season just a couple of years ago, and the Seahawks were able to make it to the playoffs, and they played a solid first half against the San Francisco 49ers and then just got drummed in the second half. But last year was not a good year overall for them. I like the young talent that they have, but at the same time, I think they're capped because Geno Smith, to me at this point, I think he's in the back half of starting quarterbacks, the way you rank him. I think he's a lot closer, and if anything, kind of off top, I put him and Gardner Minshew, if anything, Gardner Minshew slightly ahead of Geno. Like, I just look at this team, and I know that they've been working on the offensive line. I love the young running backs that they have, plus the wide receivers. I can't wait to see if Jackson Smith-Njigba is able to actually step up and have more of a role this next season, because how much longer are we going to see Tyler Lockett be out there as their wide receiver too? But the defense, even though they got a couple of young guys that you like, I just don't expect them to be able to do too much. And it's in a not as strong NFC compared to what we see with the AFC, but at the same time, the fact that the Rams, to me, look really good, plus the 49ers show no signs of slowing down. Green Bay is still really good. You like what you're seeing in Washington. You really like what you're seeing with Philadelphia, and Dallas still seems like a team that's going to take that next step forward. Plus the changes with Atlanta. It's like, how many more teams are going to be able to be not as good as Seattle? I just can't see Seattle being as good as them. And I think they'll more likely than not finish third in the NFC West. Then looking at the final team, the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's interesting, especially since Kyler Murray will now be fully healthy coming off that injury. And I like the fact that they got a new wide receiver one in Marvin Harrison Jr. But outside of him and Trey McBride, I am curious to see what Trey Benson can do at running back, because I'm not expecting James Conner to have a huge role as the season goes along. But overall, that offensive line, it's kind of patchwork. They were able to get a couple of guys in free agency, but guys that I'm not super high on. They just extended their center. They did get Paris Johnson, but overall, and they also got Jonah Williams to shore up the other tackle position. But him as a pro, I have not been super stoked about what he's been able to do. He was never all that good. I had hopes for him that he could turn it around in Cincinnati, but he just hasn't been able to do so, and he had to take a pretty pedestrian contract to be able to sign with the Arizona Cardinals. You like a couple of guys on the defensive side of the ball. Budda Baker's still the mainstay for that defense, plus a couple of other guys that you like. But overall, I look at the talent, I look at the rosters, I look at the schedule for the Cardinals, and I don't think it'll be terrible, but at the same time, I'm still not sold on the head coach that they brought in, Jonathan Gannon. He's still a guy that I need to see more from before I can have any sort of confidence that this Cardinals team can actually surprise some people. So if anything, I kind of expect them to finish last in the NFC West. That's going to do it for another edition of Cleats and Snakes. Appreciate you listening in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. We got plenty of local content, LSU Tigers, New Orleans Saints, Louisiana Raging Cajuns, and so much more, plus plenty of other podcasts. So if you are looking for maybe some NASCAR, maybe you're interested in golf, how about just learn about sports in general with the Miguez mindset? We've got it all for you here at ESPN Southwest Louisiana. But until next time, talk to you later.